Hi everyone, and welcome to this third devlog on this community project. If you're new here, first of all, welcome to this channel where I share my game dev journey. You're joining us in the middle of a community-driven project where I'm trying to make you guys and girls participate as much as possible in the creation of this game. We first defined the game. You can see this process in the two first videos of this series, and once the game's genre and mechanics were defined, we brainstormed on how we would actually implement these ideas. We are now currently creating the game, and I'm still trying to make you participate as much as possible in the creation of the game. I read all of your comments on YouTube, and if you want to bring this participation to the next level, you can join the Discord server and have a real impact by voting in the polls I submit to you. If you're wondering why this is not the usual face cam intro, I have a valid explanation. My phone with which I shoot my videos had a problem, a small technical problem, and it was still covered by the warranty, so I shipped it to Back Market for repair, and it got stolen on the way there. I'm hoping Back Market can refund my phone. Anyways, since you can't even see me right now, let's just jump straight into the devlog. You'll see that during these 4 days, I made some great progress on the automation side of the game. I won't hold you much longer, so just enjoy the episode. So in the last episode, we had just created this UI panel for the production buildings, and we had some work left. We wanted the inventories of the production buildings to be restricted inventories to accept only some type of items, and we also wanted to make the player be able to work in that building. So that's how we started day 9. First thing, I realized my inventories were really terribly designed on my production build. That basically took me 3 steps back, and so I reworked the hierarchy for these inventories. And I also wanted to make them feel more grounded on the overworld, so I created a tile map inside the building prefab, and that allowed me to create a dirt background on these buildings. And for this to actually look good, I also had to repaint the overworld in just grass. Now this looked really cool, but my inventories were still broken. So I spent a lot of time fixing these inventories, and then I tried making it so that they can only accept the items that are required for the recipe. That seemed to be working, except for recipes that require 2 different items. You could put the first item in both inventories, and that was not what I wanted. After many more bugs and even more UI reworking on my side, I finally got this very nice looking visuals for these inventories, where the item that is required for the recipe is displayed in transparency in the inventory slot. Next on the list for the production buildings, I want them to display icons when there are problems relative to that building. For example, if there are missing items for the recipe, if a worker is not assigned to that building, or if there's no recipe selected. And I forgot if the output inventory is full. I linked those icons to the production building status. Well, for the moment, only the recipe selected icon and the input items icon. And to end this day with a very satisfying touch, I implemented the ability for the player to work in the building. So at the moment, it's just cosmetic. It's only the visuals that are working and the animations that are synchronized, but it just looked really cool, and it was a nice way to end the day. If you're still watching this video at this point, I think you deserve to know we recently welcomed a new member in our family. Say hello to Loli, our cute little dwarf rabbit. We adopted him at the local animal rescue place, and he's just the cutest little bunny. My partner and I, we're delighted to have this new little guy in our life, although I'm pretty sure someone here is not as happy as we are. This is some footage of the first encounter between Tao and Loli. And here's some footage of like the second or third encounter. It takes a while to create a trusty relationship with this furry friend, but we're getting there slowly, using a lot his unconditional love for food. On this aspect, he looks a lot like Tao. And now, more or less 1 month after adopting him, we're starting to have some real quality time with this little guy. We're so happy of our decision of adopting him. I wish I could show you some recent footage of him. You would see how funny he is right now. I'll share that with you in some later devlogs. Getting this production building to work was actually a lot of work. There were a lot of things that didn't work correctly. I couldn't interact with the input inventory. Working in the building didn't seem to produce anything. It was actually producing stuff, but the inventory UI wasn't refreshing. It was a bit of a mess setting this up, but I think after an hour or so, I got everything working fine and synchronized. A very annoying bug due to the fact that when an item was produced, it was directly put in the player's inventory. So when the produced item enters the player's inventory, it refreshes the UI, and so it's not possible for the player to transfer an item stack in the production building's input inventory. Since when an inventory refreshes, it basically deletes everything inside of it and it recreates an object for each item in the inventory. So to fix that, I decided to make the items actually drop in the world when they were created. That's great, but right now the player can't collect his items since they're stuck in the building. I still didn't fix that bug. So I created this system where when you exit the production building, all the items created are sucked to the player. And I also increased the force that would apply to them when they're dropped, and I slightly randomized it. That's just for visual purposes, but I think it looks good now. And a new bug just entered the arena. The problem is now that when your inventory is full, the items actually disappear. They are not added to your inventory, but they're still destroyed from the world. To fix that, I tried making so that when the player picks up an item and he doesn't have enough space in his inventory for that, it drops back the item with the amount that he couldn't carry. And as you can see, it didn't work quite as expected. That's when I realized I think I will never finish working on the inventory system. There will always be some problems and there will always be some new functionalities to add. And just so you know, that's not something I was happy realizing. It's fun playing with the inventory to a certain extent. At least once I have everything working here, I hope I can reuse it efficiently in other games. I'll have my very own custom inventory system built, and that's something I could be proud of. But first I need to build it. Around half of day 9 had passed, and I thought it was a good time to finally start working on the worker, on those humanoids you would free from the dungeons, and that will take several roles. They can be assigned to rerun the dungeon, to work in your factory buildings, to transport items between the factory buildings, and later I'll also add a specific job for long distance transportation. So I named the roles as such: Dungeoneer, Worker, Haulier, which is short distance transportation of items, and Shipper, which is long distance transportation. I created the two first humanoid types in order to have a small variation and to be able to test stuff. Orcs and dwarves. Once the animations were set up, I added the basic roam behavior for these creatures, and well, stuff was working well for the moment. Except this dude is ice skating right now. I could now start building the workers AI, and the first thing I wanted to work on is a system to assign a production building to that worker. So as you can see, I created a system that calculates a score for the production building that is right now only based on the distance from the humanoid to the production building. The closer it is, the higher the score. I used my super handy behavior designer to create this AI, and I think I was using it like in a terrible way. I reworked that later on, but I'm still learning to use that asset, so don't judge. After a while, I managed to make it so the humanoid goes towards his assigned production building, and when he's close enough, enters the production building to work inside of it. I then handled the fact that when a production building has a builder assigned, it won't show up in the available production buildings for another worker anymore. So each production building only has one worker assigned. The end of the day was hitting, and I was super happy with my progress. Each little humanoid was waiting for items to be put in their building to start working. Good little workers. Capitalism would be proud of you. But I didn't mention the fact that when the player starts working instead of a builder, things don't work as they should. So I think it's important for the player to know when something is not working in his factory. We already solved that for the production building, and now for the workers, I added this question mark that would activate when there's something wrong. It activates whenever there's input items missing in the production building. And as you can see, the behavior tree is already starting to become a mess. Slight visual upgrade here. I synchronized the workers info in the building UI's panel with the state of the worker. We now know which humanoid type is working. We have his state that synchronizes with what he's actually doing. And most importantly, we have his name. Yeehaw! Did I just yeehaw something? Please no. I think I should submit this to a poll in the Discord, like, should I stop improvising when recording my voiceover? More seriously, I actually created a poll for this topic, not the voiceover, but the naming of the humanoids. I offered 3 options on the Discord server. Either we would use the Discord members' usernames for the humanoid names, either they could propose some names for each of the humanoid types, for example, or I would generate a name randomizer with a prefix and a postfix. The poll's results are very tight, so I'm still undecided on what to do. Maybe I could even combine the 2 popular options, having the Discord server members propose prefixes and postfixes, and then I would create the name randomizer. That could also be an option. I think I should
submit to the power of the poll.
Anyways, brace yourselves. Boring stuff incoming. Refactoring the chest script in order to also make it a building, because right now the chest is very specific to the dungeon and I need to make that a building so that the player can also build chests. I'm going to skip that part and we'll head straight into the creation of the second job, the haulier. So here in this devlog, just know that the orcs are always workers and the dwarves are always hauliers. I think the dwarves will actually be terrible at hauling because they will be very slow. Press F for the dwarf. Now this is where stuff actually starts getting complex with the haulier's AI. I need 2 different functions here, one to identify the best destination building first of all, and then another one to identify the best source building for that destination building. I started with the most basic criteria, the distance to the building, and of course for the source building, I have to check if the building's inventory has the required item for the destination building. I then added another criteria to identify the most priority destination building. So now the amount of items missing in order to fill the item stack of the destination building is also taken in account when calculating the priority of that building. As you can see, the more I'm filling up this inventory, the lower the score of the building. So for the priority setting for the destination building, I stopped here for the moment and I started working on identifying the best source building for the highest priority destination building. Again, I started with a very simple algorithm. So this function shuffles through all the buildings that have been spawned in the overworld and it will return the buildings that have the required item for that production building. Then the humanoid calculates a score for each of those buildings, which is for the moment only based on the distance to the humanoid. Oh, and in order to maximize the potential of the worker, I also made it so that a source building that doesn't have enough items compared to the maximum carry amount of the humanoid, which is just set to 5 for the moment, does not appear in the source buildings list. So if a chest just has like 2 items, it doesn't show up as a source building. I know there could be better ways to do this, but I also know that we're on day 11 and I want to finish this game by day 20 to 30 maximum, so I need to move on, and I don't think that complexifying the algorithm just to take less than 5 items in account would be super interesting, and it won't change the face of the game, so, you know, making decisions. Am I anticipating some "you could do this way" comments? Maybe I am. And just kidding, I actually really like reading those comments. Keep doing them, I learn a ton with them. It's just that sometimes try keeping in mind that I have a time constraint to that project, and generally in all my game dev projects, so I can't spend like 5 days working on one small algorithm. That is one small piece of the game. Anyways, parentheses closed. Back to my haulier's AI, and as you can see, the behavior tree is really getting cluttered and messy, and that's because I'm putting both the haulier's AI and the worker's AI in the same behavior tree. I'll fix that later, don't worry. Well, actually, that's what I did right after. I actually have 3 different behavior trees, one for the jobless humanoids, the ones capitalism are ashamed of, one for the haulier, and one for the worker. This looks much better. I ended day 11 by adding the ability for the hauliers to actually move items from an inventory to another. There's no visuals yet, but as you can see, 5 items are being removed from the input inventory and are being added to the output inventory. Yay! Great! Come join the Discord to vote in the next poll. If you were wondering, of course I played Palworld. Not for long though. I think after I beat the first boss, I wasn't really in the mood for this kind of game. It felt a bit too grindy, and I think I'm not that attracted by collectible creature games. That was kind of a disappointment. I don't know, was I the only one with this feeling? With the feeling that it is a good game, it has a lot of good and original ideas, and it does scratch a lot of my itches when it comes to video games, but still I don't know why I just didn't didn't play it that much and I don't want to play it anymore. Does any one of you have this feeling here? I don't know. Maybe it's the combat system or the grindiness. Maybe it's the fact I was playing it alone and it's much better with friends. Whatever the reason, the result is the same. $30 wasted. So it was very frustrating not to see the haulier carrying stuff, and the MiniFantasy assets have these freshly new created carrying animations. These would fit perfectly in that project. Look at this little dude sweating his life, carrying apparently nothing. By the way, if you're interested in these assets, you can always grab the whole collection with a special discount that is specific to my channel. Link in the description for more info. So of course I need to add a visual for the item he's carrying, and I animated the position of the item to synchronize it with the carrying animation. This wasn't very hard to implement and it looked really cool straight away. Now you understand why he's sweating. So the visuals were pretty easy to implement, but the logic behind it would still require a lot of work. Someone explains me how he just created items from nothing here. Oh, and by the way, that's when I actually implemented the fact that a haulier would not pick up items from an inventory if the inventory doesn't have enough items to cover the maximum carrying amount. A short and efficient fix: when the building's output inventory is full, the worker now stops working. I then made it so that the output building and the input inventory linked to that building would refresh every time the carrier picks up or drops an item. So now the haulier is now almost completely autonomous. Do you notice a difference now when I try placing a building? If you thought grid snapping, you're totally right. I think now I'm going to trigger that satisfying tidiness feeling for most of you. Except right now there's no visual for the grid, so I tried making my own system to make that grid visual. The system I'm creating here is based on my game Hidden Tactics, where each grid element has its own visual object. This works very well in Hidden Tactics because grid elements are big and there aren't too many of them, and I need these objects in order to show information to the player. For example, which grid object he's hovering, which tiles some ranged units can reach. So that's a handy system in Hidden Tactics, but in that game it was a terrible idea from the beginning, and I think I knew that in the back of my head, but it was even worse than I imagined when I pressed play. So I followed a tutorial for a shader to show the grid. To be completely honest with you, I'm learning a ton on this journey, and shaders are definitely not on my priority list. So basically I blindlessly followed this tutorial that was really good actually. I think I understand the shader logic, but I don't think I want to learn how to create my own shaders yet. I have a super awesome asset for shaders, and I think I'm going to stick to that asset for quite a while. Anyways, I made it so that the grid appears only when you try placing a building, and it was looking good, except for that weird jittery feeling when you're moving. I don't really know what it's caused by. First I tried reworking my virtual camera, decreasing the smoothing on the X and Y axis, and I also added the pixel perfect camera. That has something to do with the jittering, and it did reduce the amount of jittering on the grid and in the game in general, but it didn't completely disappear. I don't know if you have any other leads on this. I'd be interested to know, so feel free to drop that in the comments. And by the way, talking about the grid system, I was wondering if I would keep an option to allow the player to free place his buildings, so I submitted that to a poll in the Discord server, and apparently a vast majority think this option would be kind of useless. I still wanted to know what you thought about this, and I'm pretty happy with the poll's result. This gives me a good excuse not to work on that option, I guess. Thank you all that voted no. Oh, and one last thing I wanted to do on this day 12 was to actually kick out the worker that is in the production building when the player decides to work inside of it. And except for that small visual bug, it was working pretty well. And guess what I spent approximately 1 hour doing after this? Ladies and gentlemen, I present you actual items that make sense in that game. No more parchment and coins and random carrots. We now actually have wood that can be transformed into planks, stone that can be transformed into cut stone, and clay that can be transformed into bricks. I even added the first transformation building, which takes up some wooden planks and creates a basic shield with that. Awesome, right? And that will also allow me to test the haulier's AI on that, check if he actually can transport items from one production building to another. And yeah, as expected, this didn't work. What the hell are you waiting for? Capitalism is really unproud of you. There you go, I see you've made up your mind. Keep working. Just walk a little slower, please. Now, to end this day on a really satisfying touch, I wanted to get a super cool screen recording of a basic factory setting at work. And that didn't look really good actually, for a few reasons. First of all, the pathfinding. I decided to remove the colliders from the workers. This increases performance since the workers were updating the navigation graph every given amount of time, here 0.3 seconds, but with many workers that could have an impact on performance. And secondly, it just looks much less cluttery now. And this also made me realize I should add another parameter in my algorithm to identify the best destination building, which is how many hauliers are already assigned to that destination building. Because as you can see right now, the workers are successfully filling up each production building, but they're all working on the same production building, and this doesn't make a lot of sense. So that's the first thing I'll be implementing in the next 4-day series. For now, I had my awesome screen recording captured that I could share on my Discord server, and this marked the end of day 12 and of this third devlog. I really like where this game is going. In the next devlog episode, I'll be finishing up the haulier AI, and then of course I'll be implementing the dungeoneers, which is the core mechanic of this game. Once the 3 basic jobs for the workers will be set up, I'll go back to the dungeon aspect of the game, polishing up the dungeons and allowing for the player to free workers from the dungeons. So thanks so much for watching this episode. I also hope I'll get my phone bag by next week, and I think now you can finally start thinking about the fact one day in a not so distant future you might be able to press that play button.